In this video, we're going to take a look at variables in JavaScript. So I'm going to start by creating another file here. Let's go to the File menu and New File, or I can just use this icon here in the Explorer in Visual Studio Code. So either way is good. Let's take a look. So I create a new file. I'm going to start giving my files names that have section numbers and file numbers in, just to help me organize this course and so that you can find my code more easily on GitHub. But you don't need to do that, of course. So you could call this variables.js, but I'm going to give it a number and call it 01050 space variables.js. All right. Now let's basically recreate the hello world program that we had last time. So I'm going to write console.log and single quotes and hello world, and at the end we should really put a semicolon. It will work without that, but a semicolon is kind of used to define the end of a statement, a complete sort of little bit of code in JavaScript, and I think it's good practice to put it in generally. Okay, so now we can go to the terminal, zoom out a bit here, and if I do ls in this directory, I can see my new file, and I can run it with node and file name. So I've used a tab key to autocomplete the file name here, and because I've got a space in mine, in order to stop the bash shell interpreting this as two file names, one called 01050 and the other variables.js, the bash autocomplete helpfully put a backslash in front of the space that stops it being treated as a separator character. If you just called your file variables.js and it's not got spaces in the file name, though, you won't have to worry about any of that. All right, so let's run it and check that it works. It says hello world. Okay, now we could use what we call a variable to refer to this hello world message. And you'll see as we go along through the course that variables are a key part of computer programming. They're absolutely a fundamental building block that we use here. So let's write this. I'm going to make up a name. I'm going to create a variable called message, all lowercase, and I'm going to set that equal to, in single quotes, hello world, and I'll put a semicolon at the end. And then we're going to output this variable, or the value of this variable, in console.log. I'm going to write console.log, and in the round brackets I'm going to put message. So what have we actually done here? Well, first of all, let's just see it running. If I run it, it doesn't seem to do anything different to before. It just says hello world. So this is what we call a string in computer programming, this bit of text. And message, it's like a label that I've devised. So if you think about it, okay, this text here, when the program runs, it must be somewhere in the computer's memory. And it's as if we put a label on that bit of memory called message, so that we can use the label message to refer to this piece of text later on. And then we say console.log message. We can also do this with numbers. Let's go down and create another variable. Let's call this, I don't know, let's call it days and set it equal to 7. So it's like the number of days in a week. So days equals 7, semicolon. And then if I write console.log days like this, and then let's go back and to the terminal and run this. And it says hello world, and then it says 7. So we've output 7. So some people get confused because at this point it looks as though we're saying days equals 7. And what does that even mean? That's not really what we're doing. This equals here is what we call the assignment operator. So these are variables. Message and days are variables. And we're using equals to assign a value to them. You can think of it as though we're storing a value in them. Although I think in JavaScript, arguably, it's more accurate really to say that these variables are like labels that we use to refer to these values, these literal values we call them. But basically, we say here that we are assigning values to variables. So I've assigned the value hello world to the variable message, and I've assigned the value 7 to the variable days, and then we can output those. Try those for yourself, and we'll discuss this more and look at some refinements to this in the next video. And this is another video in the JavaScript and Node.js for Complete Beginners course. So in this video, we're going to look at declaring variables. In the last video, we saw how you could create variables. So what we're doing here is, here I've got a variable called message, and we say that I'm assigning it the value hello world. Notice that text is in quotes because it's what we call a string. And then later on, after outputting that on the console, after printing hello world, I create another variable and assign it the value 7. Notice the 7 is not in quotes, and that's because it's a number. We don't put numbers in quotes when we want to use them actually as a number. So if I want to add and subtract things or whatever with this days value, then we don't put it in quotes. So again, we're assigning the value 7 to a variable called days, and we're outputting it. Now we're going to be looking at this, and if you're a complete beginner, you'll probably, this is totally new to you. It might seem confusing, probably it will, but you develop fluency with it just by using these ideas, and it will become clearer later on. What I want to show you here is we want to start off using best practice, and there's a problem with what we did in the last video. So supposing I wrote message equals hello, we can use double quotes or single quotes. It doesn't matter. It's just whichever you prefer. There's no difference between them in JavaScript. Hello world. Let's write that, and console.log message. Notice variables don't get put in double quotes either. That's a mistake beginners sometimes make. Only text values get put in quotes here. All right. So later on in my program, I might write message with only one S as a mistake, and I might say equals, I don't know, how are you? And then write console.log message. Let's run this program. I'll maybe clear my console to make this less confusing. All right, so this kind of does what you expect, really. This second variable with the misspelling is a completely different variable to this one. Now, if you've got a big program, and it can be very easy to misspell a variable name. So it might have been my intention here to change the value of this variable, which you can do. You can give it a different value later on. But what I've done instead is I've basically created a completely new variable with a different name just because I've misspelt it. So perhaps it was my intention to do this, just to change the value of this variable, which you can do. But because I misspelt it, I created an entirely new variable. Now, the upshot of this is that it's not good practice to simply create variables by directly assigning a value to them like this. There are two things that we should do. So we're going to do this in every JavaScript program that we create. Firstly, at the top, we're going to write this in double or single quotes, we're going to write use space strict and then a semicolon at the end of it. Now, if we write message equals, let's say hello, and then try to output message console.log message, let's try this. We get an error, and that's actually a good thing. What useStrict forces us to do is it forces us to use a keyword to declare our variables, and the keyword that we usually use is let. So I say let message equal hello, and then I output message. And if we run this program, now it says hello, it actually works. Okay, so if you've been using JavaScript for a while and you're not a beginner, then you will have also seen the keyword var. So we could also use var like this. Var message equals hello. Var, you might guess, is short for variable. And this also works. What's the difference between them? Well, let is kind of a later introduction to JavaScript. We're going to be using let for various reasons that I'll go into later on. But for now, you just have to know that when we create a variable, we should write let. So let message equals hello. And you can change it later if you want to. Let's take a look. So I can say message equals how are you, question mark. And now let's output it again to see how it's changed. Console.log message. And we'll run it. And it says, how are you? So if we look at this, what we've done here, when we say let message, we call this declaring a variable. Now, you can put comments in your JavaScript. If you want a single line comment, if you write 2 forward slashes like this, everything that you write after that will be a comment. So let's write here, declare the variable message and assign the value hello to it. All right, and then what we're doing here is we're print the variable. Let's just write print message. And here, what we're doing, notice there's no let keyword here. We've declared the variable, and we only have to declare the variable once in our program. Here what we're doing is just assigning a new value to an existing variable. So here we're saying assign a new value to the variable message. So we declare a variable, we assign a value to it with the assignment operator equals, we display it or print it on the console. Later on we assign a different value to it, to the same variable, how are you, and we print that again on the console. And if we run this program, it does this. So don't worry about this too much. Again, if you are a complete beginner, this will be confusing. I've seen people try to learn programming by writing loads and loads of notes, and that's the wrong way to learn it in my view. The right way is just to practice it. So the thing to do now is type this program out for yourself, if you're a beginner especially, and get it working and run it, and don't sweat too much over what it's doing. But look at it and think, is there any way you could change this that wouldn't break it? And if you can think of any way, then try that out. I'm sure you can think of some changes at least that you can make to this program that wouldn't break it. Have a go. See if you can change this without breaking it once you've got it working. But get this working first. So type it out, get it working, and then try to experiment with it and see how you get on. And you'll find that as you keep typing stuff and experimenting with it, gradually your confusion will go away and your fluency will build up and it will all begin to make sense. But really, learning programming, I always say it's kind of in the fingers. You've got to type stuff and experiment with it It's useless in my view to make loads of notes and to really stare at something and agonize over it and try to understand what it means. A lot of the time that's useless. It's much better to actually type it out and practice it and play around with it. Okay, so we'll leave it there for this video. Until next time, happy coding.